Meeting is being recorded, as you've just heard. So first of all, item number 1 on the agenda is apologies. Lisa, have we had any apologies, please?
We have quite a number. Councillor Gareth Jones, Councillor Gareth Roberts, Councillor Chrissy G, Councillor Sharon Dolman, Councillor Michelle Walker, Councillor Beverly Parry-Jones, Councillor Tina Claydon, and Councillor Marion Bateman and Councillor Davis Cook have both given notice that they may have to leave the meeting early.
And I see that Councillor Gareth Roberts is here, so that apology must be incorrect. So welcome, Gareth. Glad that you're able to make it. So item number 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Mark Young?
I'm just going to check with Gareth regarding the piece of land in Denbighshire as chair of planning, please. I have previously, so just to check, I think I do need to declare an interest.
So, Chair, the obligation would be to consider the interests at Denbighshire rather than here. You are you don't have an interest in considering the training site at the fire authority. You might need to think about whether to declare an interest at Denbighshire. That would, of course, be for Denbigshire's monitoring officer to advise on, but as their nominated representative to the fire authority, there's an exemption under the code that means it's only personal in any event.
Okay, I'll do a personal one then, just to be on the safe side. Jock and Vale, Gareth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? I don't see any other hands going up. In that case, we'll move on to item number 3, which is notice of urgent matters. I haven't received any notification of any urgent matters, so that does not apply. So we go on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meetings held on the 17th of July. And first of all, the AGM. So there's 5 pages of minutes relating to the AGM, and we'll just take them in terms of accuracy to begin with before we approve them. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. I can't see anybody raising their hand, so I presume that you agree that the minutes are correct. Can I have somebody to propose, please? Councillor Jeff Evans and Councillor Carol Beard, thank you very much. Will you all show that you approve the minutes, please? Diolch yn fawr. I can't see that there are any matters arising. There have been some changes since the AGM, and congratulations to Councillor Mark Young, who's now the chair of the Audit Committee following Nigel Smith's departure, and Councillor Gwynfor Owen is the deputy chair, but the minutes were indeed correct at the time. So unless anybody's got any matters arising, we move on to the full authority meeting held on the 17th of July. And there's 8 pages there. Once again, if we start with accuracy in terms of if you agree with the accuracy of the minutes, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. I can't see any hands being raised, so I presume that you agree with the minutes. Will you? Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Mark Jones. Diolch yn fawr, Mark. And seconder? Diolch yn fawr, Arwyn. Will you show that you approve the minutes, please? Those are approved. Diolch yn fawr. Are there any matters arising? I note that under paragraph 13.4, we were seeking a nomination last time to the pension board, and Councillor Gwynfor Owen has stepped up to the plate to become a member of the pension board. Diolch yn fawr, Gwynfor. So that has been addressed. I can't see any other matters arising unless anybody has something that they want to refer to. No, I can't see any hands being raised. In that case, we'll move on to item number 6, which is the emergency cover review consultation outcomes. And I think it's Deputy Chief Fire Officer Stuart Forshaw who's presenting this. Diolch, Stuart.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update of the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority's emergency cover review consultation and the key emergent themes from the programme of consultation involving the public, staff, partner organisations, which was conducted between the 21st of July and the 30th of September this year, which was extended from 8 to 9 weeks following stakeholder feedback. The consultation followed the commissioning of the emergency cover review by North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority in September 2021. And extensive work has been undertaken to determine the current position and scope for proposals of improvement. The findings were presented to the member-led emergency cover working group, which met on 5 occasions between March and June this year, with the focus of the group being to consider options around the future of service delivery model to address the existing challenges and to be able to respond to future operational risks. In April 2023, the service engaged the Consultation Institute, who are a not-for-profit, well-established institute promoting high-quality public and stakeholder consultation in public, private and voluntary sectors. Since then, the Institute has provided advice, guidance and qualified peer review in line with the consultation charter and awarded the service with its certificate of consultation readiness on the 19th of July. Following a detailed stakeholder mapping exercise, the consultation programme focused on a range of stakeholder-tailored engagement activities to include the general public, staff, decision makers, local media, social media, diverse groups and representative bodies. As part of this programme, a total of 17 community engagement events took place across the region, as well as 17 meetings with equality, diversity and inclusion groups, in addition to the engagement with North Wales councillors, chief executives, members of the Senedd of Cymru and members of the UK Parliament. A comprehensive programme of staff engagement visits to fire station departments has also been delivered across the service during this time. At the close of the consultation, 1,500 responses were received via an online questionnaire, with a further 226 paper questionnaires also received. This resulted in 1,726 responses to the questionnaire. As well as the survey responses, the Fire Brigades Union have also provided 2 alternative options, which they've invited to present to the next member-led emergency cover review working group, with the aim to allow members to consider them against the full evaluation criteria set out in section 17 of this report. In-depth analysis and further details of the consultation results are included in the full consultation report, which is included in Appendix 1 of the papers. And this report was created by Sarah Barnett, who's an independent research consultant appointed by the authority to ensure that the consultation responses were independently, accurately analysed and reported. The report aims to provide the authority with information on the key emergent themes identified during the consultation on the future of emergency cover in North Wales and assist members with decision making prior to setting the budget for 2024-25. I'll now hand over to Area Manager Anthony Jones, who will present the emergency cover review consultation findings from Sarah Barnett's research in more detail. Over to you, Ant.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. As Stuart's just highlighted, I'm going to present the findings of the report that was completed by Sarah Barnett as part of the emergency review consultation. So the full consultation ran from the 21st of July until the 30th of September, which was extended from the 22nd of September. And as Stuart has just mentioned, the full consultation received 1,726 responses, based between 1,500 online responses and 226 paper-based. Members could note that 144 responses were completed in Welsh and the remaining 1,582 in English. And we received 191 responses from members of staff of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Over 400 people attended community engagement events across the consultation, and over 480 people were engaged with as part of our equality, diversity, inclusion sessions, or engaged with our equality, diversity and inclusion officer as part of the consultation. We received 100 inquiries or objections, and we received 5 petitions and formal responses from local authorities, town councils, other public and representative bodies. A breakdown can be found here of the location of survey responses, and members can see that 7% of responses were from Anglesey, 25% from Conway, 11% from Denbighshire, 11% from Flintshire, 14% from Gwynedd, and 18% from the Wrexham area. And your members can note that 15% of the respondents gave no response or did not state. As part of the consultation, we asked consultees a question of which risks most concerned. And members can see here that house fires was the most worrying risks to respondents, with 70% selecting this, followed by road traffic collisions, wildfires and floodings. As Stuart just mentioned, we developed a set of decision-making criteria to form development of options, and those decision-making criteria, we asked respondents which were the most important to you. Those criteria being emergency cover, how our fire appliances respond to emergencies, prevention and protection services, how we keep our homes and businesses safe, affordability, keeping our services as affordable as possible, providing the best value for money, workforce, the impacts of changes on our teams, a fair and equitable service, having our staff at the right place at the right time with the right skills, and social value, recognising the impact of any changes we make on our communities. And you can see here from the consultation response that overwhelmingly respondents felt emergency cover was the most important decision-making criteria to them, followed by prevention and protection services. Members will be aware that we consulted on 3 options. Here, the first option was maintaining a 24-hour response model at existing whole-time stations, with Rill and Deeside fire stations changing to a day crewing duty system, and the addition of 3 day staff fire stations at Corwin, Porthmadog and Dolgellau. And these stations would be staffed utilising relocation of the whole-time firefighters from across North Wales based on the changes at Rill and Deeside, but also the use of staff on our rural whole-time duty system. In response to the consultation, we asked the question of consultees, to what extent do you think option 1 meets the needs of the communities? Overall, 2/3 of respondents, 68%, agreed that option 1 met the needs of their communities. And members can see a breakdown in relation to the constituent authorities within the slide, with Conway at 76%, Gwynedd at 73%, Anglesey at 66%, and Wrexham at 67%. Are more frequently agreed that option 1 met the needs of the communities than those in Denbighshire and Flintshire. 65% of employees within the service agreed that this option met the needs of the community, with 31% disagreeing, compared with 21% of respondents disagreeing overall. Option 2 within the consultation was a response model where Rill and Deeside fire stations changed to a day staffing duty system. Wrexham's 3rd appliance is removed, maintaining 1 fire appliance staffed by whole-time firefighters and 1 fire appliance staffed by on-call firefighters. The redistribution of staff from Rill, Wrexham, Deeside and the rural whole-time duty system enables the addition of 3 day staff stations located at Corwin, Porthmadog and Dolgellau, and a reduction in whole-time firefighter numbers by 22. This realisation of 1.1 million of savings towards the budget for 2024-25. To what extent, we asked consultees again, what extent do you feel option 2 meets the needs of our communities? Overall, 18% of respondents agreed option 2 met the needs of their communities, with 63% disagreeing. Respondents in Wrexham, 84%, Flintshire, 75%, Denbighshire 67 most frequently disagreed that this option met their needs of their communities, and this was the case for at least half of the respondents in all areas. 28% of employees of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service agreed that this option met the needs of their communities, with 59% disagreeing. The third option that went to consultation was a response model with Rill and Deeside Fire Station changing to a day staff duty system. Wrexham's third appliance is removed, maintaining one appliance staffed by whole-time firefighters and one appliance staffed by on-call firefighters. The redistribution of staff from Wrexham, Rill, Deeside fire stations and the rural whole-time duty systems enabled an additional 2 day staffing stations located at Porthmadog and Gogledd, and a reduction of firefighter numbers by 36. This option also proposed the closure of 5 on-call fire stations, being at Awdurdod, Beaumaris, Recordiad, Conway and Llanberis, resulting in a reduction of on-call firefighter numbers by 38. This option would realise a savings of 2.4 million towards the budget 2024 to 2025. Again, we ask the same question: to what extent do you feel option 3 meets the needs of your communities? Overall, only 3% of respondents agreed that option 3 met the need of their communities, with 93% disagreeing. Respondents in Wrexham, 95%, Conway, 95%, Gwynedd, 92%, and Flintshire, 92%, most frequently disagreeing with option 3, with this the case of 86 in Anglesey and 90 in Denbighshire. Only 5% of employees within North Wales Fire and Rescue Service agreed that this option met the need of their communities, with 92% disagreeing. To summarise, the main themes arising from the consultation survey, the community engagement events, the equality, diversity and inclusion sessions, and the formal responses to the consultation are found here. An appreciation of the service and the opportunity to provide feedback as part of the emergency cover review, the timing of the consultation, the support for additional day crewing fire stations, provision of prevention services, the well-being of our workforce, objections to moving services and provision from one area to another, objections to changes to cover at Rill and Deeside, objections to changes to the provision at Wrexham, objections to closure of our local on-call fire stations within option 3, supporting other services, the importance of recruitment and retention, the requirement of the Fire Brigade Union North Wales options to be considered, the provision of services over cost savings, alternative approaches to cost savings, and wider funding issues were all themes raised and arising during the consultation. Thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation. I'll hand you back over to Stuart.
Diolch, Anthony, thank you. So members, to move on to the recommendations, members, it's recommended that you are asked to, number 1, note the comprehensive range of community and stakeholder engagement activities delivered as part of the public consultation. 2, note the analysis of the consultation feedback in the report from the independent consultant, Sarah Barnett Research, including Appendix 1. 3, note additional comments and suggestions received for making improvements to the provision of a fair and equitable emergency cover across North Wales. 4, note the member-led emergency cover working group recommend that officers continue to work on variations of option 1, plus the points raised in the responses to the consultation. And 5, agree the recommendation from the member emergency cover review working group that the authority cease working on options 2 and 3 from the emergency cover review based on clear rejection from the public from within the consultation report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. And before I throw it open for comments and questions, can I just thank Ant and his team for the fantastic work they've done in collating all the consultation responses and putting the report together. And if you have a look at the appendix, there's a wealth of information there as well. And it's been really good to see the response that we've had to the public consultation, but it has obviously involved a lot of work then in digesting that and putting it all together. So thank you, Ant and the team, for all the work you've done. So I'm throwing it open now for any questions or comments from members, please. I think Councillor Gareth Sunderland's hand just about went up first, and then I'll take Brian Apsley and Mark Young. Gareth?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned about the Fire Brigade Union and what consultation and communication going forward will there be on option one with them it combined, because I'm just concerned that we're going to get to an option, at something at the end of it, and all of a sudden they'll object. So I'm just working with them and not against them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does the DCFO want to come in on that?
Yes, I can do, Chair. Well, as included in the report, Councillor Sunderland, you can see that the Fire Brigade Union have been engaged throughout the consultation. Even prior to the consultation, during pre-consultation phase, we were discussing the options with the Fire Brigade Union and other representative bodies as well. We discussed this in bespoke sessions, just specific to emergency cover review, but we've also been discussing this regularly through our joint trade union meeting, which is chaired by Assistant Chief Fire Officer MacArthur. And going forward, you will note that within the report, we have received 2 options from the Fire Brigade Union. We continue to discuss those options with them. They've been afforded the invite to come to the next emergency cover review working group, which all members will be invited to. And that will give all members the opportunity to kind of listen to the options along with officers, and also ask some questions if you'd like to. And we've got a number of emergency cover review working groups as well, following that meeting, to then look at more detail, should the recommendations be accepted today, around variations of option one, but also how the Fire Brigade Union's options as well can tie into maybe any of those variations. So yeah, lots of dialogue still to take place, lots of dialogue that's already taken place. So that will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Chief, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the reassurance there that we are working at a local level with local FBU representatives who will no doubt have been in contact with you. But equally, we are discussing at a regional level with the regional FBU reps, who I had a meeting with the other week, in order to try and work towards a more mutually agreeable solution to what we're trying to achieve. So yes, we're trying at every level to come up with some form of consensus.
Thanks very much. It's good to see that. It's good to see there's open communication, and we're going forward like that. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you, Gareth. A very important point to raise. And in terms of sort of the media interviews that I've been doing, it hasn't always been picked up, but in every media interview that I've done, I've stressed the fact that the FBU support the need to improve day cover in rural areas. They're in full agreement with that. It's just a case of if we can get a consensus as to the best way forward. But I think it is interesting that in the report that Anne's presented to us, that 2/3 of the employees within the fire service agree that option one is a viable way forward. I think that's worth noting. Councillor Brian Apsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to put a positive spin on this and welcome the results of the consultation, thank the working group, and thank everybody involved in the analysis, etc. I do think that we've got to include other issues in the overall decision making. I know that we're not making decisions today. I think that we consider on page 20, para 17 gives the options of for meeting the criteria, including protection, prevention services, affordability, and a fair and equitable service. And then on page 23, including the implications, must meet the well-being obligatory efficiently. Chair, I think I'm jumping ahead, but I think there's a link to items 9 and 10 that we're going to discuss later, which we should consider today and in December. For example, if you allow me to, on page 59 of item 9, It quotes from the corporate plans for 2021 to 24 and the long-term objectives, including making improvements to the health and safety and well-being of people in North Wales, helping communities improving their resilience. And then in item 10 on the annual performance assessment, again on page 159, safety and well-being of people in North Wales. And in the ways of working on page 152, it states preventing problems from occurring or getting worse. So I think there's a link there that we mustn't forget. We can't forget because, you know, well-being is legislation. But I do think this is aligned to figures that we've got on page 214, you know, where I know we haven't got the figures for this year yet. There was a 7% rise in fires attended, 6.2% rise in false alarms, 13% rise in road traffic collisions, and a 30% rise in other emergency incidents. So thankfully, of course, the most important there was a decrease in deaths and injuries. But I do think that we've got to consider our policies in a link, if you like, but in particular the Wellbeing Act 2015. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those comments, Brian. Councillor Mark Young next.
Yeah, Jochen, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, thanks for the report, and I think the consultation has been a really good piece of work. If you look at some reviews in the authority, it is hard to get engagement, so I think we've engaged well. And although option 3 was definitely a big no from the community, I think it was right to put there to test it. I don't think consultation should always be easy, so I think it was right. I think the recommendation is correct, but what I'd like us to think about is, obviously, we're dealing with our staff. They have an impact, and 2 and 3 certainly does have an impact. So if we go the way I think it goes today, I just want yourself as chair and with a discussion today of how we communicate that with staff, etc., because I think that's really important. And I know we've got a future vote, but I think some sort of communication would put at ease our workforce who we want to look after. So although I understand the recommendation, I hope it's okay for me just to seek some sort of communication agreement after today. Jochen Vow, thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. Yes. Dafydd, dych chi eisiau dod I fewn, swch yna? Diolch, Dafydd, Treasurer.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Swn i'n cael dechrau drwy ddiolch i'r uwchsyddogion gwasanaeth tân am redeg efo ymgynghoriad mor drylwyr. Dwi'n gwybod bod chi hefyd, Cadeirydd, wedi bod mewn nifer fawr o gyfarfodydd, ac dwi'n gwybod bod y prif swyddog tân a'r dirprwy ac eraill wedi bod yn cwrdd â nifer o bobl ynglyn â hyn, ac wedi wneud ymgynghoriad hollol drylwyr, ac dim cyllid sydd wedi gyrru'r ymgynghoriad yma, ond gadwch i ni fod yn glir am ymlygiad ariannol y penderfyniad yn y pen draw. Mae'r ymateb i'r ymgynghoriad yma'n hollol glir ac yn gadarnhaol i'r gwasanaeth tân ag achub. A dwi ddim am ddadlau yn erbyn yr opsiwn mae'r mwyafrif o'i blaid. Ond mae hynny, pe bod ni'n mynd am hynny, am olygu na fydd modd cau'r bwlch ariannol sy'n wynebu ni, heb gynnydd sylweddol yn yr ardal a'r awdurdodau lleol ni. Bydd eich awdurdodau lleol chi mewn lle anodd yn ariannol erbyn 2024-2025, a mae'n gweithgor craffu ni fel awdurdod tân yn edrych ar y gyllideb, gyda golwg ar adnabod arbedion. Ond mae 3 chwarter adnoddau'r gwasanaeth yn y rheng blaen, a tydi opsiwn 1 ddim yn cyfrannu arbedion o'r man hynny. Mae hynny'n golygu bod hi'n anodd iawn ffeindio y 6 miliwn da ni'n wynebu fel bwlch o'r gwasanaethau cefnogol, lle mae gymaint o'r gwariant ar bethau fel technoleg ac ynni ac yn y blaen, a llog, sy'n amhosib i leihau y costau. Ac mi fydd y gweithgor craffu yn edrych am arbedion eraill mewn gwasanaethau cefnogol a rhengoedd rheolaethol i drio dod o lefel yr ardal lawr. A mae'r 6 miliwn yn golygu cynnydd o tua 15% yn yr ardal. Mae rwy'n yn gobeithio fydd y gweithgor craffu'n gallu dod â hwnnw a lawr i tua ydyn ni 10%, ond bydd hi'n amhosib dod o lawr llawer is na hynny. Felly, wrth fynd ymlaen efo opsiwn 1 yn unig, dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid i ni, fel awdurdod, fod yn barod i amddiffyn y penderfyniad yna wrth symud ymlaen. A dwi'n gwybod ni'n heddiw yn gwneud y penderfyniad terfynol, ond da ni yn gosod cyfeiriad heddiw. Ac mae rhaid i ni fod yn barod i amddiffyn hynny efo'r awdurdodau lleol, wrth mynd ymlaen i osod cyllideb ag ardal am y flwyddyn nesaf. Ac mae gennym ni gyd rôl yn cyfathrebu hynny. Wedyn, fel i'n dweud, dim cyllid sy'n gyrru hyn, a dwi'n yn dadla'n erbyn o, ond mae rhaid i ni fod yn glir am yr ymlygiadau. Gobeithio bod hynny'n dod drwad i chi.
Diolch, David. Thank you for that financial reality check. Before I bring in Councillor Gwynfor Owen, does the Chief want to come in, please? Diolch.
I was just going to come in with the communications that Councillor Young asked about. And in fact, we put something out in the weekly brief on Friday, alerting all staff to this meeting today and trying to explain that the decision that's made today sets a particular direction of travel, but is not the final decision because, as we know, that comes at the extraordinary Fire Authority meeting in December. And as David says, that meeting will coincide with us knowing what the local government finance settlement is. And I think this year we're having had this extensive consultation, having had the discussion with the public, understanding very clearly what they want from their fire and rescue service, we're probably in a better place to communicate that with our partners.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Gwynfor Owen and then it'll be Councillor Mark Jones. Gwynfor, diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Mae Dafydd Edwards wedi atab yn drylwyr un o'r cwestiynau oedd gynna i, dwi'n diolch i Dafydd am hynny. Dwi chydig bach yn nyrfys ar yr argymellion oherwydd bod y gweithgor yma gynna ni i drafod hyn yn drylwyr bellach ymlaen. Ac dwi felly'n nyrfys iawn efo argymelliad 5 bod da ni just yn cael gwarad ar 2 opsiwn heb i ni fod yn edrych yn drylwyr arnyn nhw yn y gweithgor. Ac wrth gwrs, darna o'r opsiynau fysa ni'n edrych ar ddim o reidrwydd yn cymryd bob dim sydd yn nhw i ystyried. Ond ella bod argymelliad 4 yn atab rei o'r pryderon sydd gynnau oherwydd bod o'n awgrymu bod swyddogion yn parhau i weithio ar amrywiadau o opsiwn 1. Bersonol, sy'n ni'n gweld amrymiad o unrhyw opsiwn yn golygu fydd unrhyw beth ychwanegol gael ei dynnu fewn i'r opsiwn yno. Ac felly, ella bod hynny'n atab y pryderon sydd gynnau. Ond mi ydw i yn bryderus o gytuno i gael gwarad o 2 opsiwn yn gyfan gwbl heb i ni fod yn cael cyfle i drafod nhw yn well felly. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Gwynfor. My understanding is that we are not rejecting at this stage options 2 and 3, but we are taking into account the public consultation, which clearly indicates that the public do not support options 2 and options 3, and therefore we feel that we need to focus on option 1, which the public do appear to support. So hence the emphasis going forward that we do look at option 1 as the direction of travel. I don't know if the Chief or the Deputy want to say anything further on that.
Yes, if I can support that, Chair. I think we need a direction of travel. We need a focus, and if the public have indicated that option one or a variation of option one is their preference, plus the work that's going to be ongoing with the budget working group to see what we can do around that. I think that should be where our efforts and resources are placed over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Chief. Before I bring in Councillor Mark Jones, I see that Gareth, the clerk, has put his hand up. Gareth, did you want to come in at this stage? Diolch.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. I think the point about dismissing options 2 and 3, in line with the views of the public, is that it helps to set the mind of our employees at ease as well. I mean, it was a key part of the discussions of the emergency cover working group, as you're aware, that the inclusion of option 3 in particular, correct though that was, because we needed to test whether people favoured that view, has caused some concern and worry, and that given that the public have wholly rejected that option, it's right that we should put it to one side for the reassurance of our employees, and indeed the public, who themselves were very concerned about the inclusion of option 3. As I say, correct though that it was to include it, I think we'll set a lot of people's minds at ease with the recommendations as they stand.
Diolch, Gareth. Councillor Mark Jones. Diolch, Mark.
Diolch. Dwi'n meddwl bod yr argymhelliad yn dangos maint a cryfder yn deimlad ymhlith y cyhoedd o ran cynnal y gwasanaeth fel mae o. Dwi'n teimlo bod ni hanner ffordd ydyn ni drwy'r broses i raddau, oherwydd bod ni'n gwrthod mynd â 2 a 3 ymhellach, mae yna dal lot o waith i wneud ar opsiwn 1, a dwi'n meddwl yn sicr o fewn y gweithgor, mae yna ddealltwriaeth bod opsiwn 1 yn cynnig gwahanol ffyrdd ymlaen, sydd dwi'n meddwl yn mynd i, yn y pen draw, yn mynd i olygu gwell gwasanaeth dros y Gogledd. A dwi'n meddwl bod yr ymateb i'r ymgynghoriad yn dangos faint mae'r cyhoedd yn gwerthfawrogi y gwasanaeth yma. A mae hwnna'n rhywbeth, dwi'n meddwl, dylai bod ni gyd yn falch ohono fo, yn sicr dylai bod y staff yn falch ohono fo, a dylai bod ni'n cymryd hwnna i ystyriaeth. Swn i, fel rhywun sydd wedi bod yn rhan o'r gweithgor, ac yn dal yn rhan o'r gweithgor, swn i'n licio diolch am y gwaith sydd wedi cael ei roi fewn gan y swyddogion drwy'r broses yma. Mae wedi bod yn broses gynhwysfawr iawn, mae wedi bod yn broses eitha anodd, a maen nhw wedi cael eu heriau o fewn a tu allan i'r broses. Ond dwi'n meddwl bod y ffaith bod nhw wedi ymateb mor gadarnhaol i'r ymgynghoriad, a bod yr ymgynghoriad wedi gweld eu cyfle mewn ffordd, yn golygu bod ni ar y trywydd iawn, a dwi'n gyfforddus iawn efo lle da ni'n mynd efo hwnna. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mark, am eich sylwadau. Cynghorydd John Brynmar Hughes.
Diolch yn fawr am y gwaith sydd wedi cael ei wneud, a dwi'n falch bod ni'n gwrando ar y cysylltu sydd wedi cael ei wneud efo'r cyhoedd. Dwi'n falch bod opsiwn 3 wedi cael ei dynnu allan, a posib wan wedyn ni gario ymlaen efo'r opsiwn 1 ac edrych ar y pethau gorau yn opsiwn 2. And hefyd, swn i'n licio gwneud yn falch os ni yn mynd efo yr opsiwn mae'r undeb tan wedi ei roi allan hefyd. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, members, for your comments. I can't see any other hands being raised, so are we happy to move to the recommendations? Is somebody happy to propose that we accept the 5 recommendations as have been listed? Diolch, Mark. Diolch, Arwen. Do you show that you accept the recommendations as they've been set out, please? Diolch yn fawr. That's been unanimously passed. So we now move on to item 7, which is the Chair's report. So, Councillor Mark Young, were you
Yeah,
voting,
no,
or did you want to
I
come
just
in?
wanted to agree the communication, so members do get sight of this in some format. I know we've said we put a newsletter out, but it's changed now. So I just like to understand that off any officers, please. I think it's really important that we understand how the staff are going to be communicated with. Just a confirmation, please, Chair. About
Chief.
Yes, after each fire authority meeting, we put out the headlines of that meeting. So we will do the same this time. And I'm sure Tracy has already drafted them and is amending them to reflect this. So they will go out to all staff and we will copy in members so you can see for yourselves.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mark. So item 7, which is the Chair's quarterly report. You've seen that in the agenda papers. It's been a busy quarter for myself and the Deputy Chair, given the emergency cover review that's been taking place. I don't know if there's any questions or comments in relation to the report. Can't see any hands being raised. So Chief, do you want to come in?
Just briefly, I just want to thank both yourself and the Deputy Chair. The workloads that were caused by the public consultation was immense. I don't think we've ever had quite such a lot of work in a short period of time. So thank you very much for your attendance at all those meetings, and also to other members of the Fire Authority who attended the public meetings and were able to present the findings of and the position of the Fire Authority. So thank you for everybody who's been involved.
Yeah, Chief. Deputy Chair, did you want to come in?
Yes, Chair. Can I move that the report be received, please?
I'm not sure if you can move because you're in the report.
Oh well, okay.
It's a joint report. So, but I'm sure I'm sure somebody else will be happy to propose it. Can I look for somebody else to propose this? Just for noting, Austin, seconder. John Brynmore, I think, got it. So will you show that you agreed to note the report? So moving on to item number 8, which is the annual governance statement for 2022-23. And I think it's the Deputy Chief Fire Officer who's presenting it. Stuart, Diolch.
Your Chair, I'm going to hand over to Area Manager Anthony Jones for this item.
Diolch, Chair. So as the Chair's just highlighted, this report, which is contained within pages 27 and 29 of your pack, is to present to members the annual governance statement for 2022-23 as Appendix 1, pages 30 to 49 in your pack. The recommendation is that members are asked to note the governance arrangements outlined within the 2022-23 annual governance statement, note the forward work plan for 2023-24, and approve the 2022-23 annual governance statement for publishing on the authority's website by the 31st of October. The executive summary notes that the CIPFA and Solace Delivering Good Governance in Local Government Framework 2016, the framework requires that Fire and Rescue Service authorities to publish an annual governance statement. The purpose of the annual governance statement is set out in the authority's arrangements to ensure that business is conducted in accordance with all relative laws and regulations, public money is safeguarded and properly accounted for, and that resources are used economically, efficiently, effectively to achieve agreed priorities with the benefit of local people. The annual governance statement for 22-23 is set out in Appendix 1 and has been prepared in accordance with the principles set out in the framework. The forward work programme for 23-24 is contained within the annual governance statement, and the annual governance statement has been first and second stage reviewed by Audit Wales to confirm that it is consistent with its knowledge of the authority and the financial statements. The annual governance statement will be published once endorsed by the Treasurer, the Chair of the Fire Authority and the Chief Fire Officer by the 31st of October this year. Therefore, members are asked to note the governance arrangement outlined within the 22-23 annual governance statement, note the forward work plan for 23-24, and approve the 22-23 annual governance statement for publishing on the authority's website by the 31st of October. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Ant, and I think the document reads very well. It's very comprehensive and gives a good overview of the work of the service. I don't know, a bit late in the day, but can I welcome members from Audit Wales? Can I welcome Mike Whiteley and David Tomlin to the meeting? I don't know if either of you wanted to make any comment in relation to this document, seeing you have viewed it and agreed with the content.
Diolch, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to provide a bit of feedback on that. So, as we'll see in the next item on the agenda, when David takes us through our audit findings report and our audit opinion. So our work covers a review of the annual governance statement, and we also ask our other colleague Eros on screen for his views on kind of the consistency of the documents with the fire authority's arrangements. So it is a consistent kind of with opinion that we give, which covers the annual governance statement, and happy to report no significant issues arising from our review on that, Chair.
Thank you, Mike, and yes, welcome to Eros as well. So I didn't spot you on the screen before I saw Eros. Any comments or questions from members in relation to this report, please? I can't see any. David, ydych chi eisiau dod I fewn?
Ie, dim ond cadarnhau I nodi ac diolch i'r swyddogion am roi hwn at ei gilydd. Mae'r ffurf chydig bach mwy modern na godd o blaen, ac mae wedi cael ei roed at ei gilydd yn broffesiynol, sy'n hapus I lofnodi. Gyda'r cytundeb yr awdurdod, Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr. So there are, as has been pointed out, 3 recommendations in relation to the report. So can I have a proposer that we accept those recommendations, please? Thank you, Deputy Chair. Can I have a seconder? Diolch, Austin. Will you show that you approve the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr. That's been passed. So we move on to the next item, which is the audit of 2022-23 financial statement, report and certificate. And I think, David, you are introducing the report. Diolch.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Byddai ddim yn hir iawn o hwn. Mae yna nifer o eitemau ariannol ger bron chi heddiw. Os newch chi bear with us wrth fynd drwy hyn, mae yna ofyn statudol I gael penderfyniad ar nifer ohonyn nhw. Wedyn, cyflwyno'r datganiad archwiledig o gyfrifon 22-23 y flwyddyn nath orffen mis Mawrth dwytha. Blesa gen I gyflwyno hyn I chi, a hefyd canfyddiadau yr archwiliwr allanol ar ran archwilydd cyffredinol Cymru, sy'n cadarnhau barn archwilio diamod. Mae bob sôn fel trysorydd yn dipyn o relief I gael y barn diamod yna, adroddiad glân. Ac rhaid I ddweud, mae'n bleser gael o mor gynnar lle yn y cylch o'i gymharu â nifer o gyrff cyhoeddus eraill fydd yn aros dipyn hirach am y ddarn lle. Ar unig gyflwyno'r datganiad drafft I chi, heb I archwilio i'r awdurdod ar yr 8 ôl i'r cyfrifon alltro gael ei cyflwyno i'r awdurdod cyn hynny. Wedyn, oedd di'r sefyllfa ddim wedi newid yn sylfaenol, felly dwi ddim am ail gyflwyno yr holl wybodaeth I chi yn sgil yr archwiliad annibynnol. Mae rhan fwyaf o'r data yn eitha tebyg. Mae yna fan addasiadau wedi wneud, a mae hynny unrhyw beth o bwys wedi nodi yn adroddiad yr archwilydd. Felly, na I jyst nodi'r argymhellion ddigwydd, byddwn i'n gofyn heddiw I chi fel awdurdod I nodi'r sefyllfa alltro ôl archwiliad, fel mae'n cael ei nodi yn asodiad 1, I nodi adroddiad archwilydd cyffredinol Cymru, sy'n atodiad 2, a nodir llythyr cynrychiolaeth ac awdurdodi'r cadeirydd a finna i lofnodi hwnnw ar ran yr awdurdod ar ôl y cyfarfod ac yn cymeradwyo'n ffurfiol y datganiad terfynol. Ond yn gyntaf, swn i'n licio cyflwyno'r archwilwyr i chi. Mike Whiteley, sy'n reolwr efo Archwilio Cymru, a David Tomlin uwch archwilydd. Swn i'n cael cyfle iddynt gyflwyno'r adroddiad. Ar ôl i Mike atab cwestiynau, swn i'n cyrraedd yn nôl am gair byr, cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr, David. So can I hand over to Mike and David to come in, if that's okay? Thank you very much.
Diolch. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take you through our ICE 260 audit report today. So I'm David Tomlin. I'm a senior auditor at Audit Wales, and I've been a part of the North Wales Fire audit the accounts since 2019. And this year been allocated to lead the audit of the financial statements for the 22-23 financial year. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, I'm joined by Mike Whiteley, who's our audit manager. He's been supporting the team throughout the course of the audit. And also our colleague, Ross Lake, is within the call because he's a member of our performance audit team and presenting an item later on the agenda. So I'm sure that you're aware this hasn't been a typical year for the finance team at North Wales Fire. When presenting our audit plan to the audit committee in September, we referenced the significance of the cessation of the service level agreement between North Wales Fire and Conway Council and the new challenge and audit risk that it presented in both the migration from Conway Council's financial systems to the newly implemented Technology One ledger system, plus also not having the usual services provided from Conway Council when producing the financial statements. And that's why this year I'm particularly happy to be able to present the audit opinion, because from our perspective, it's been a really positive one. We've continued to work with the finance team throughout the accounts process, and I'd just like to express our thanks to Helen MacArthur, Helen Howard, Katie Owen, and the rest of the finance team for their help and support, and really do acknowledge that it's a significant amount of work for all members of the finance team involved, so really appreciated from our side. So, as mentioned, I'm happy to take you through our ICE 260, and I'd like to start by referring to paragraph 8, which sets out that the Auditor General for Wales intends to issue an unqualified opinion, which is great news, and it's a reflection of the draft accounts that were provided to us. They're a really good quality set of accounts supported by comprehensive working papers, which is really pleasing to see for us. So there are a couple of areas of the report that I'd like to mention. In paragraph 12, we note that there's one uncorrected misstatement within the accounts. It's not material to our audit opinion, but is above what we consider to be our trivial threshold, which is £47,000. Therefore, in accordance with the ICEs, we must disclose it within our auditor's report. So details of the misstatement have been noted within paragraph 12 of the report. However, more than happy to provide further context to members with regards to that, should you want that from ourselves. Paragraph 13 of our auditor's report then highlights that there were some misstatements within the draft accounts which have been discussed and agreed over the course of the audit, resulting in the accounts being subsequently amended within the final version that's been shared with you today. Again, I'm not proposing to go through each of these corrected misstatements with you, however, would like to refer to Appendix 3 within our ICE 260, which sets these out. Paragraph 14 of our ICE 260 then sets out that there were no other significant matters arising during the course of the audit. And given the challenges that the finance team faced this year, as mentioned earlier, that is a massive achievement in itself. And I think that is something that should be shared with the committee. And then that then takes you on to Appendix 1, which is our letter of representation, which is the letter of representation, which illustrates the representations from the Fire and Rescue Authority, and then our proposed audit report and the contents of what our audit opinion covers is set out within Appendix 2. And again, just to reiterate, an unqualified opinion. So the opinion also covers that the information within the narrative report for the financial year is consistent with the financial statements and in accordance with the Code of Practice on local government accounting, local authority accounting, and that the information in the annual governance statement is consistent with the financial statements. So the Auditor General is expected to complete his signing of the ICE 260 following adoption of the financial statements by the FRA today. and receipt of assurances from our Clwyd Pension Fund audit team. However, we don't anticipate this to result in any added complications or delays. And then finally, as mentioned, Appendix 3 then sets out the corrected misstatements. I did mention earlier, I'm not proposing to go through each of the corrected misstatements, but I certainly feel like it's worth sharing that we've observed a much lower number of amendments required compared to previous years. So overall, it's a really positive report to present from our side. We'd like to reiterate our thanks to sort of everybody involved within the finance team. And then I'd like to open the floor to any questions. Mike and myself are happy to take any at this point, should any members have any.
Thank you very much, David, for that report. And it's very encouraging to hear your positive comments about the quality of the work produced by the finance team. And I'd like to, as chair of the authority, also offer our thanks and appreciation for the excellent work they've done. Any comments or questions from members in relation to the report, please? Councillor Mark Young.
Diolch, Chair. Yeah, really good, positive report, but you did mention one item, a correction of a mistake, and I think it would be amiss if you didn't just summarise that for us. So, really good report. Obviously, the team's done a lot of work on this, which is excellent, but I think that summary should be shared with members if you can. Diolch. Thank you. Yeah,
Absolutely. And yes, so presumably you're referring to the uncorrected misstatement that's noted within the ICE 260. And so a bit of a summary from our side. During the revaluation of the authority's land and buildings, the external valuers, external from the finance team that are contracted to provide valuation services, applied an incorrect location factor to all land and buildings within the Gwynedd region, which subsequently resulted as part of the calculation towards the valuation of land and buildings within Gwynedd, slightly overstated the net book value of land and buildings within Gwynedd by £153,000. As sort of mentioned within our audit report, and as I presented to you earlier, certainly not material to our audit opinion, and I think the subsequent amendment involves a significant amount of work behind the scenes, and given that it isn't material to the accounts, the authority are well within their right not to amend it, and it won't affect our opinion. So I hope that addresses.
No, that's fine, Jochen. Thank you very much, Jochen.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Brian Upsley.
Yes, Chair. My question was the same as Councillor Mark Young, but perhaps that question can be put to one of the officers.
Thank you. I'm happy to pick this up if that's acceptable. I think really the summary is that it's a technical adjustment. It's predicated on evaluation. It isn't material, it's 153,000, but when you look at the overall value of the fixed assets of 57 million, it is also an estimate as well. So making the adjustment at a very late stage in the audit would affect so many different financial statements. Given its level of materiality, the decision was made that it wouldn't impact on the user of the accounts. So a user of the accounts would still be able to read those accounts and understand the financial transactions and the financial position of the authority without that adjustment being made. So in conjunction with the auditors, we were happy for it to be recorded in the ISA 260 as unadjusted, and it'll be taken into consideration next year when we prepare the accounts.
Thank you, Helen. Brian, are you satisfied with that explanation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Helen.
David, did you want to come in?
Yeah, dim ond I ddweud, mae'r gwall mae'n cael ei gyfeirio ato fo fel mae gwerth asiedau sefydlog wedi bod yn dipyn o gur pen i nifer o sefydliadau wrth gael cyfrifon yn y 2-3 blynedd dwytha, ac mae'r gwahaniaeth yma'n gymharol bychan. Mae'n swm reit fawr i'r dyn yn y stryd, 100 o filoedd, ond fel rhan o gyfrifon yr awdurdod, dio ddim yn beth sy'n ni'n dweud yn materiol, ac mae gen yr staff yr awdurdod flaenoriaethau eraill i ganolbwyntio yna fo yn y cylch yma, wedyn yn falch o gydweithrediad yr archwiliwr i dderbyn nad ydyn ni am addasu hwnna. Ac gyda hynny, swn i'n jyst licio diolch i'r tîm yn Archwilio Cymru am ei mewnbwn a'i cydweithrediad. Maen nhw wedi gwneud eu gwaith yn broffesiynol ac efo'r cydweithrediad arferol, ond eleni, dwi'n meddwl bod ni wedi cyflawni canlyniad rhagorol yma efo'r cyfrifon yma. 2022-2023 oedd y flwyddyn gyntaf o ddefnyddio'r system ariannol newydd. Y tro cyntaf i'r tîm mewnol o dan Helen MacArthur, Helen Howard a Katie Owen yn bennaf, iddyn nhw gael cyfrifon heb fewnbwn Cyngor Conwy a'r cyfrifwyr yna. Ac gan bod hynny wedi bod yn lwyddiant clodwiw, dwi'n meddwl bod diolch yn dyledus iddyn nhw o'r tîm mewnol yn gwasanaeth tân, cyllid yr adroddiad tân yn ogystal â'r archwilwyr allanol a swn i'n cael diolch iddyn nhw.
Clue. I don't see any other members raising their hands, so perhaps we can move therefore to the recommendations. So there's 4 recommendations in relation to accepting the report. Can I have a proposer, please? Gwynfor Owen, diolch yn fawr, and the seconder? Diolch yn fawr, Austin, will you members show that you approve the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr, that's been passed. So we move on now to item 10, which is the annual performance assessment for 2022-23. This document has been through the executive panel, if I can just highlight that. I'm not sure who's presenting it.
Diolch, Chair, it's myself again.
Okay, over to you, Anne, thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of the report, which is pages 145 to 148 of your pack, is to present for members' approval an assessment presented as the annual performance assessment, which is contained within pages 149 to 228 of the pack, of North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority's performance during the year 2022-2023. In relation to its progress towards achieving its long-term improvement and wellbeing objectives and medium-term equality objectives, and its compliance with the applicable Welsh language standard. The recommendations within the report ask members to approve the assessment of the authority's performance of 22-23 for publication on the authority's website by the 31st of October 23, and to note the service's intentions to publish a simple summary version of the key elements of the assessment report. The executive summary can be found within paragraphs 2 and 4 of the cover of the report, and within the background section of the report, paragraphs 6 and 7, it describes the legislative requirements the authority must adhere to as follows. The authority is required under various pieces of legislation to give public account of its performance, progress and compliance. These pieces of legislation include the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015, the Local Government Wales Measure 2009, the Equality Act 2010, Strategy Duties Wales Regulation 2011, and the Welsh Language Wales Measure 2011. The annual performance assessment has been created to report against all 4 of these within a single document for publication on the authority's website. Paragraphs 8 to 15 of the cover report provide members with the information in relation to the annual performance assessment, and I will summarise as follows. The annual performance assessment demonstrates that the authority has made good progress last year, meeting its long-term improvement and wellbeing objectives. Steady progress has been made during the year towards achieving the authority's 2020 to 2024 equality objectives, and the authority continued to comply with the applicable Welsh language standard. This year's annual performance assessment opens with introductory sections which describes the legal requirements for reporting, presenting information about the challenges and the issues facing Wales in the future, along with information about the area covered by the authority. This provides context to aid understanding of the authority's provision of service and its contribution to the well-being of North Wales communities. The middle section of the assessment reports gives a detailed account of the specific actions that the authority took last year to meet its long-term improvement and well-being objectives. As in last year's report, more emphasis has been placed in this year's report on the narrative and case studies that demonstrates the real difference the authorities' work makes to people's lives. Evidence of progress against all actions is included within the assessment. There were no reported accidental dwelling fire fatalities during the year. The middle section of the report also presents information on the authorities' compliance to the Welsh language standard. As of the 31st of March 2023, 757 or 84% of service employees had been assessed or had self-assessed or had been assessed as having at least some Welsh language skills, with 37% categorised as fluent Welsh speakers. The progress that was made during 22-23 towards meeting each of the authorities' 6 strategic equality objectives is also described in this section of the report. The final section of the assessment includes performance indicator information in the Welsh context and account of how the authority has met its commitments under the All Wales Dwelling Fire Response Charter. Activity during this year included handling 13,224 emergency or 999 112 calls, alerting an emergency response within 90 seconds on 86.1% of occasions against a target of 80%, attending 5,896 emergency incidents, of which 2,011 were fires, delivering fire safety talks in schools to 18,001 children and young people at key stages 1 to 4, and completing 18,052 safe and well checks. Additional information at the end of the assessment includes the outcome of the work undertaken by Audit Wales that looks specifically at the authorities' progress made to reduce and prevent false fire alarms. The report concluded the authority has made significant reduction the number of non-domestic false fire alarms it attends, but needs to address financial risks and capacity issues to ensure its risk-based approach is sustainable. Therefore, the recommendation is that members approve the assessment of the authority's performance in 22-23 for publication on the authority's website, and note the service's intention to publish a simple summary of the key elements of this assessment. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you, Ant. Once again, a very comprehensive and well-written document. Any questions or comments from members, please? As I've said previously, it has been scrutinised by the executive panel. Deputy Chair?
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Can I just congratulate the team on presenting this report? And part I liked was the education when they went into the years 1 to 4 in school to educate the youngsters on the dangers of fire. If they learn at that age, Chair, they will remember it, hopefully, through the rest of their lives. So congratulations, and congratulations to the North Wales Fire and Rescue Service for the amount of work that they do and the way that they carry out their services. Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comments or questions in relation to the report? Case, can I have somebody propose that we accept the report? Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Gareth. Will all members show, please, that they approve? Diolch yn fawr. So we now go on to the financial update for 2023-24, item 11, and I think it's Assistant Chief Fire Officer Helen MacArthur who's presenting this. Diolch, Helen.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, and bore da pawb. We're moving through the financial years this morning, so this report on the agenda sets out an update on the 2023 financial year. Members will recall that in January 2023, the budget was approved, the net budget of £44.4 million. And this is the amount that is to be met from the levy from our constituent local authorities. However, to achieve this, it was also necessary to take a number of measures. That included deferring expenditure into future years, temporarily not appointing to approved posts in our establishment, and also through the use of reserves, albeit in the short term. I won't go into the detail of those measures as they were outlined to the Fire Authority in the paper in January 2023. Also, when the budget was set, the pay award for the firefighters hadn't been agreed, either for the 2022-23 financial year or the 23-24 financial year, and you were aware at that time that that made planning the budget quite difficult. Planning assumptions were made, and that was that they would settle at 5% and 4% respectively, but actually subsequently settled at 7% and 5%. The current working assessment is that the actual expenditure will exceed the budget of 44.4 million by 1.1 million. However, the actual overspend is higher, as we've also received almost £500,000 of non-recurring income following the local government pension scheme. So very much a one-off windfall income. I'd like to take the opportunity of going through some of the detail. So gross employment costs will exceed the budget by approximately 700,000. This has been reduced to 200,000 following that income that I've just referred to. And the overspend is largely attributed to the pay awards over time, but it's also been mitigated through vacancies as well, so holding back vacancies that we've not yet filled. Overtime is only payable to operational staff, and we include a budget for contractual overtime, such as staying at an operational incident that spans the end of a shift. However, non-contractual overtime is paid to operational staff to maintain watch strength or availability levels. And the 6-month cost for non-contractual overtime is £90,000, and therefore the full year forecast will be in the order of 180,000. The non-pay budget is £10.4 million in total, but although being carefully managed, current costs are forecast to exceed this. However, it's also an area of significant uncertainty for us due to inflationary pressures and also supply chain issues. And initially, we were hoping that those supply chain issues would be specific to COVID, and in some areas there has been improvement, but in other areas, such as our PPE kit, they remain challenging. So the premises budget of 3.5 million covers over 50 buildings and includes a range of expenditure headings from energy, national non-domestic rates, insurance, statutory maintenance, so annual testing, but also repairs. An overspend of approximately 400,000 is forecast in relation to our maintenance costs, and proactive work is ongoing to appeal rateable values, which may bring this budget further into balance. On a positive note, the availability of materials now appears to be, or the challenges have subsided, albeit that the costs remain high, but the availability of contractors remains a factor that we need to carefully manage. The transport budget of 1.3 million includes insurance costs of our fleet, fuel, statutory testing, and repairs and maintenance. The availability and cost of parts is an ongoing problem, and the fuel costs had stabilised, but more recently fuel prices have risen, and therefore this remains an area of risk and uncertainty for us. Suppliers account for over half of the budget and include a range of costs. These range from operational consumables, testing and maintenance of operational equipment, PPE, as well as ICT costs. The ICT costs in particular include the normal day-to-day license costs such as Microsoft, but also other expenditure items such as measures to improve our cybersecurity, but also the costs of software critical to our operational response. And this includes call handling software. So when you dial 999, we use specific software, the alerting devices for our retained staff and our day crew staff who are working from home, the mobilising system, and also the emergency service network communication system. This is the communication network is known as Firelink, and actually it's a national system, and that in itself costs us about £1 million per year. Third-party payments relates to expenditure with other bodies such as North Wales Police, who provide our facilities department, Flintshire Council, who administer the local government pension scheme on our behalf, Carmarthenshire, who administer the firefighters pension scheme, and also Conway, from whom we receive legal support in respect of our property matters. The budget for our capital financing costs is 3.1, and that relates to both the interest on loans, but also the charge to revenue for using the assets. That's also known as the minimum revenue provision, which is quite a technical adjustment. The forecast is an underspend against budget, which is due to the fact that we have utilised internal cash to avoid borrowing in the short term, but that we've also invested our surplus cash and benefited from interest received. This has been possible as we had surplus cash at the start of the year following cash support from the Welsh Government for pensions. We've also, we pay our national non-domestic rates on a monthly basis, whereas historically we pay them on an annual basis at the start of the year. I appreciate, members, this is a very high-level summary, but the details sitting behind this will be considered by our Budget Scrutiny Working Group, and that group is going to meet between October and November. And for members that aren't aware, this is a subgroup of the Audit Committee made up of members from each local authority. This work will aid the detailed understanding and also support the budget preparations for the future financial year. I'd like to turn very briefly to the capital programme, and overall the budget for the capital is £7.2 million, and the forecast outturn at this stage is 5.2 million, so it will be necessary to roll forward some of those schemes. It's anticipated that the funding for the projects will be through the use of borrowing, but also using earmarked reserves, and these are projects that perhaps couldn't progress in previous years, and therefore we've ring-fenced that money. Borrowing at the end of the Q1 was 23.2 million, and that reflected the positive cash flows. But as the capital programme progresses, it will be necessary to take out further borrowing this financial year. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that overview. Over to members. Any questions or comments, please? Councillor Mark Young.
Chair, did you want me to come in with regard to the members' budget scrutiny working group, or later? I can fit them with yourself.
I'm wondering if it might be better for you to come in the next item, Mark. I think it is important to have sort of
that's okay. No problem.
So I think you've blown us all away, Helen, with your excellent overview analysis. Can I have somebody therefore to propose that we accept the 4 recommendations? Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder? Diolch, Austin. Will members please show that they approve the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr. That's passed. So now we move on to budget setting 2024-25. I'm not sure if it's you, Helen, that begins, or is it David as the treasurer?
Na i ddechrau ar hwn, Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr, David.
Da ni'n rhannu'r gwaith rhwng Helen a fi bore yma. Ond wrth gwrs hi sy'n gwneud y swmp gwaith paratoi. Yn bleser eto gen i gyflwyno'r broses gollidebu y rhagdybiaethau cynllunio a'r amserlen i bennu cyllideb 24-25. Mae'n ofynnol i'r awdurdod bennu'r gyllideb refeniw ar gyfer 24-25 yn ei gyfarfod yn Ionawr. Ac mae'r gwaith eisoes wedi cychwyn ac yn mynd yn ei flaen yn adolygu lefel y gwariant, a mae crynodeb o'r ffigurau yn atodiad 1 ar tudalen 249 o'r pecyn Cymraeg, tudalen 244 o'r pecyn Saesneg. Mae hwnnw'n dangos efo'r elfennau o chwyddiant a twf y bwlch ariannu 6 miliwn. Da ni eisoes wedi adnabod a ddatgan yn gyson ers i'r cytundebau tal uwch na hitio ni yn Chwefror. Be da ni'n gofyn i chi yn yr argymhellion fel aelodau ydy nodi'r rhagdybiaethau cynllunio, nodi'r cylch gwaith ar gyfer y gweithgor craffu, a dwi'n siŵr ddaw cadeirydd y pwyllgor a chwilio fewn ar hynny mewn eiliad, ac nodi hefyd y cyllideb chwynol sy'n mynd i'r panel gweithredol Mi fydd hwnnw'n mynd i'r panel gweithredol ar y 19 o Ragfyr, cyn mynd ymlaen i amgymeradwyaeth yr awdurdod ar yr ail ar 20 o Ionawr. Mae'n ofynnol i'r awdurdod bennu cyllideb gytbwys ac i'r awdurdod llawn i gymeradwyo. Mae cymeradwyaeth ariannol yn seledig ar lot o wybodaeth a ffactorau fel chwyddiant a gofynion gwasanaethau, pa adnodda sy'n ar gael a'r weledigaeth strategol. Ac ar y pwynt yma, dwi'n handed drosodd eto i Helen MacArthur roed fymryn o gig ar yr esgyn o'r manylion heini.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, David. Helen, over to you. Diolch.
Thank you, diolch, David. I'm always quite nervous when somebody starts because they probably cover quite a number of the areas that I'm going to. So just reiterating some of those timescales, the ultimate deadline for our communication of our levy requirement to our constituent local authorities is the 15th of February. And to achieve that, we will bring the final proposed budget to members on the 22nd of January 2024. The planning for this year, or for next year, sorry, is especially complex. In part, that's due to the emergency cover review, because the starting point is always your service delivery model. Clearly, at the moment, we have a number of options and variations thereof. So in addition to that, we're looking at inflation. A number of our contracts have inflationary uplifts embedded within them, and our suppliers are tending to invoke those. We're also looking at high interest rates. They seem to have stabilised, but we've no guarantees that they're not going to increase. In addition to that, we've got outstanding pay awards, this time for local government staff for the 23-24 financial year, but also for the 24-25 for all staff. So we had that period of grace, really, notwithstanding the fact that the pay award for 24-25 was higher than expected. At least we knew what it was going to be. That said, supply chain difficulties are becoming business as usual. And to put that into context, when we order now gold PPE kit, historically we were looking at a 12-week turnaround. That's now elongated, and we're talking months as opposed to weeks. One strand of the emergency cover review was also for the need to work towards that financial stability. And therefore, it was important that we considered a high-level planning assessment of what a continuation budget might look like when we started that emergency cover review. This resulted in a figure of £6 million being discussed, and that was put forward both as our continuation budget, but also is the figure that you've seen in option 1, and option 2 and 3 were variations thereof. So the £6 million is broadly broken down into the underlying deficit brought forward from 23-24, and that acknowledges that the actions that we took quite late in the planning cycle for this year were not sustainable without changing that service delivery model. Largely, that was because they relied on posts not being filled and the use of reserves. We've also had to build in general inflation, and that includes pay awards for 24-25, very much unknown at this stage, but also inflation for those contracts, but also in general inflation in respect of things like the valuation of the firefighters' pension scheme. We've also got to factor in capital financing increases. These are a number of factors which are largely dependent on interest rates as well as the capital programme. And you'll see within that appendix that we've separated out specifically the training centre. When we developed the medium-term financial plan last year, that was very unknown in terms of both costs and timing, and a provisional sum was input for that. And that will progress and be updated as the training centre becomes much clearer. Members will appreciate that these figures were prepared in February 2023, and they can only ever be indicative. But more importantly, the detailed budget planning is currently underway. And what we do in that respect is every single budget head, every single budget holder is required to look at their budget. So we look at it from a number of ways. What is the need, both in terms of its staffing structure? Are there going to be any material changes? what are the non-pay requirements, and also any need for capital. What the paper does today is confirms that the planning assumptions that we will be using when preparing that budget, but it also highlights the uncertainties and the risks. So I'm going to work through Appendix 2, and within our employee costs, the budgets will be formulated on existing service delivery models, but running alongside that, these will be updated models that prepare for the outcome of the emergency cover review. We're making a planning assumption that pay awards will be 4% for all staff, and the budget will also include capacity to grow the establishment of retained staff, which is essential to the maintenance of that availability. A key risk includes the valuation of the firefighters' pension scheme. Unlike the local government scheme, this is completely unfunded, and essentially it is revalued every 4 years, and we're expecting the latest valuation very, very soon, and we're talking at some point this month. It's very, very unknown at this stage what that might look like, and we have to plan for every eventuality. We're looking for as much support as we can from the Welsh Government, but that by no means is guaranteed. So again, we have to make some provision for that. A further risk to us in respect of the employee cost relates to our underlying activity levels. We plan the budget for normal activity levels. We monitor these throughout the year. So on a monthly basis, we monitor those the financial costs associated with employees, just to look at any variances. The working assumption being that the general fund would be utilised in the first instance should spate conditions or general activity result in an overspend. But importantly, that will be drawn to the attention of members if that was necessary throughout the year. I think it's fair to say that since 2008, non-pay expenditure was largely capped, but significant pressures have now been experienced. This is being driven not only by the inflation and the supply chain issues, but also too by some step changes in health and safety legislation, which are specific to our sector, and they tend to relate to the issue around contaminants. Part of that is making sure that our firefighters have the appropriate kit. Not only that they have that kit, but it's laundered on a more regular basis, but also that they have access to washing facilities. So as soon as they leave an incident, there's a shower within the hour, and that's known therefore to reduce the risk of those contaminants. And then also looking at what we call cleaned cab technology. So when we buy a fire appliance, the working intention now is to remove as many contaminants from the cab as possible. Internally within the organisation, we adopt a zero-based budget approach, whereby each department is tasked with identifying the business critical or unavoidable elements that make up their non-pay budget. And some of those unavoidable elements are significant. They include such things as our insurance costs, which amount to about £500,000, gas and electricity, 1.2 million, national non-domestic rates, and also the MyLink contract. ICT costs form a significant element of this, and as previously described, they include such things as Microsoft Office licenses, and that allows the corporate network to function through to those response critical software. I'm really pleased to confirm that we've recently achieved Cyber Essentials, but this is very much an ongoing cost. It's something that we can't rest on our laurels. It's cost both not only in software, ensuring all of our software is up to date and any potential holes are plugged, but also in staff time in maintaining it. I'd like to draw attention also to the carbon neutral target of 2030. It's drawing ever closer, and whilst members will be aware there isn't a specific budget for it, and we're not proposing that, what it will be is built into individual plans. So very much when we do, say, building work on our buildings, we ensure that any environmental plans that can be taken are taken. Touching on the capital financing costs, these represent about 7% of the underlying budget requirement, and it's another area subject to volatility. The planning assumptions assume that interest rates will remain high during the forthcoming year, and we'll undertake sensitivity analysis to to see how exposed we are to further interest rate increases and the impact thereof. Key area of consideration in this respect is the new training centre, and the £6 million for, initial planning assessment assumes that those costs will be incurred in 24/5. Current working assumption is that building work won't commence in 24/5, and therefore this element will be revisited and refined. Our sort of miscellaneous income is relatively low, but we also do receive some grants from the Welsh Government. These were definitely reduced in 23/4. We lost the filing grant and the pensions grant, the SCAPE grant, which was only partial funding towards our pensions. That's now being absorbed into the RSG. Our working assumption at this time is that those remaining grants will continue at the same level. That immediately gives you a cost pressure because of pay inflation and general inflation, but we haven't had inflation with those grants for a number of years. But the main risk is that if those grants are removed, that would pose a significant cost pressure for us. The members would have to consider in more detail. This report also outlines and confirms the arrangements that we have in place for budget scrutiny. And in that respect, the Audit Committee is a scrutiny function, and sitting below the Audit Committee, we've established a working group with a terms of reference that's programmed to meet on 4 occasions over the next, between October and November. And the principal objective of that is to scrutinise pay, non-pay and capital and interest costs, primarily to provide assurance to members that we're considering all aspects of the budget, that we've understood the risks, and we've articulated what those uncertainties might be, but also to look at whether there are any opportunities for future cost savings as part of the budget planning. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the report that members may have.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I'm just picking up on that last bit in terms of seeing whether or not the Budget Scrutiny Working Group can identify any savings. What's come back quite clearly from a number of sort of leaders of local authorities is that they expect us to look at management costs and administrative costs within the service to see whether or not any savings can be identified, which sounds easy in sort of to say, but in practice I'm sure is going to be quite a difficult task. But I'm sure Councillor Mark Young, as the chair of the Audit Committee and leading the working group, will be able to sort of get to grips with that. Mark, do you want to say anything in relation to that?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. So yes, I'm not sure if I was picked or was the only one who wanted to do it. So thanks for the chats, because I think talking to yourself on how we should approach this is really important. But I can thank Helen and David and members of that committee, because it's clear we understand each other's roles in this, and that professional challenge done in a respectful manner, because we are dealing with some staffing data within this is very good. And we met on the 18th of Monday, the 18th of September, where we agreed to set up the group. And as said by Helen, we got one member from each local authority in North Wales. And our first meeting, we agreed the role of the group, the terms of reference, operating environment, key dates, the budget overview. So I think we know where we're going. I had the pleasure doing a recent training day where I spent a full day with auditors, which wasn't as scary as I thought. And sorry, chaps. And I did test this with them. They thought it was a good approach that day. So I think it's a good way of doing it. We've got a job to do. And I think all the members, they'll attend the meetings. We will scrutinise it. I'm sure we'll have disagreements in the professional environment. And just to give weight to what we're doing, we're also going to request that internal audit help us with this. So that view from an outside organisation will be very helpful. So I think it's going to be a really good piece of work. I also think, David had touched on this, and Helen, when we do go to ask for money, it's going to be tough because councils are going to be struggling. And I think the fact we've done this gives weight to what we're asking for. So it's a good piece of work, and thanks for members and officers working with me. And I look forward to working in the future on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Any comments or questions from members in relation to this particular report, please? Councillor Brian Apsley.
Sorry, Chair. Thanks. David made a reference to page 244 and the initial planning assessment. Obviously, a feature of that, the bottom line showing the levy at 44.3 million and then going along to the end at 50.423. Am I right in saying that that's the predicted total that needs to be provided for, 24-25? And am I right in saying that that is an increase of 13% plus?
In that ballpark, yes, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Brian, and that's why there's sort of a considerable importance on the budget scrutiny working group to see whether or not we can sort of reduce that shortfall and the budget ask going forward. So no pressure to Mark and his team in relation to that. Do you want to come back in, Mark?
Yeah, just one question and one response to that. This work in progress, we don't know which option we're going through, and we've all agreed option one may change. So if someone can come in from the SLT just to confirm that this is at the moment where we are, but it could change. And the other question from me on the pensions, there's some retrospective claiming might go on from members, which are historic. How do we manage that, Helena? And I don't want to be difficult, but I think members just need to understand that there's a slight risk there. And then the other question on, we don't know which option we've gone for, so this at the moment may change. Thank you.
Very much so. I think in the narrative, I probably heard the answer, and the answer is that when we started the work around the emergency cover review, given that one of the strands was ensuring that we had that financial stability, it was incumbent on us to actually start that initial planning. So the £6 million was very much the initial planning assessment at that time of what the budget ask might be, should we carry on as we are. Without a shadow of a doubt, that work will continue. It'll be refined, and then as we get towards December, the final budget ask will be presented through to members, along with the risks, the uncertainties, and all of the planning assumptions. So very much not set in stone, very much work in progress. And Councillor Young, you make a great observation about pensions, and we have a couple of items on the agenda today around pensions. The retrospective adjustments and the retrospective legal challenges will be built into the firefighters' pension valuation. So the cost for those, they're already in our pension liability on our balance sheet because the Government Actuaries Department have worked them through. But the cost for them on an annual basis is met through the employer contributions, which could increase quite considerably over the coming years. So I guess we've factored that into the next year, but it is something we need to be mindful of for future years also.
On the pensions, Chair, it's somewhere where in a less fortunate position than the 6 local authorities, really, because theirs is a funded scheme. They're getting the benefit of good investment returns by both Gwynedd and Clwyd pension funds and reduced pension contributions over current and for future years. Whereas we have an unfunded scheme for firefighters, we're going to have to just take stomaching the increase in pension cost, which is entirely unavoidable, really. It's it is what it is. Whatever the scheme is nationally, we have to live with the implications of that. That's one of the like interest rates which have gone up, etc. One of those central costs, which have been referred to by others in consultation. You know, it's really difficult for us to make savings on that type of cost, and yeah, we're going to have to try and find savings everywhere, but it won't be on pensions or interest costs, etc.
Yeah, diolch, Dafydd. I can't see any of the hands being raised, so there is 4 recommendations in relation to the budget setting report. Can I have a proposer that we accept those recommendations, please? Thank you, Brian. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Mark. Will members show that you approve recommendation? Back to you again, Helen, I think.
Diolch. I'm going to start with an apology. Paragraph 2 of this report states that in December 2003, apologies, I have no idea where I was when I wrote it, but it should actually read December 2023. It relates to the authority's treasury management activity for the period April through to June 2023, and this information has previously been presented to the audit committee that's reviewed it in detail, so I don't necessarily intend to get into the depths of the report. In overall terms, it's worth reiterating that the authority can only borrow for capital purposes. That means that we can't borrow if we have a revenue budget deficit, but we can borrow for our capital programme. However, and where possible, we would always use our internal cash, not necessarily going to the external market to borrow. Similarly, we don't carry surplus cash for anything other than working capital purposes. So we don't carry cash to speculate on investments, and we only use it for the purposes that we need it. Our external borrowing at the end of June was 23.23 million, and that was a reduction since the year end. Of that, £20 million is borrowed from the Public Works Loan Board and £3 million from other local authorities. The weighted average interest rate is 2.46 for the PWLB compared to 4.35 with local authorities. And the reason for the difference is largely local authorities is very short term, so whatever the prevailing interest rate is at that time. With noting that the authority has almost 5.5 million reaching maturity in the next 12 months, which will invariably result in higher interest rates being incurred. The actual debt at the year end will also increase, as I've mentioned previously this morning, to fund this year's capital programme. Cash held at the end of June was quite high. It was £10 million, and that includes the receipt of pension cash support from the Welsh Government. And the Welsh Government on an annual basis gives us the gap between the money that we collect from our employees and our own employer contributions and the amount we pay out to our current members, and we get that cash support at the start of the year. So you'll appreciate it's only a timing difference and will be fully utilised in the year. Again, surplus money was invested in call accounts for the authority's bankers, and that rate ranged from 4.16 through to 4.9. So as much as we are being hit by increased interest rates, we're also benefiting from interest received on our investment, on our cash holdings as well. So a very quick overview of that report, which has gone to the audit committee, and the audit committee endorsed the recommendation for the fire authority to approve the prudential indicators. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Helen. As you've pointed out, this report has already been scrutinised by the audit committee, so it should be a case of us just rubber stamping the recommendations unless anybody has any questions or comments. I can't see any hands raised. So can I have a proposal that we accept the recommendations, please? Diolch, John Brynmawr. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Jeff. Will members show? Diolch yn fawr. So moving on to item 14, the Firefighters Pension Scheme update. And back to you again, Helen.
Thank you. Last 2 reports from me today, both of which relate to the Firefighters Pension Scheme. For relatively new members, I think it's important to note that that you as the Fire Authority you are the scheme manager, and you're supported in that role by a local pension board. And the local pension board is made up of both employer and employee representatives. So the first paper on the agenda today relates to the age discrimination. It's something that's affecting all public sector schemes, and numerous reports have come to the Fire Authority setting out the background. It's for information and confirms that the legislative process required to address that age discrimination in the firefighters' pension scheme has now concluded, and the new regulations came into force on the 1st of October. In Wales, firefighters' pension scheme is devolved, so the legislation needs to be in place by the Welsh Government. So the Welsh Government have produced the regulations. In terms of what that means for yourselves as a scheme manager, it means that the authority has 18 months to work through and enact this legislation. So that means that all current employees, retired members and deferred members will have their pension record updated. And practically, that means different things for different cohorts. So for our current employees and deferred members who are within scope, they will have their record updated and they will be put into the legacy scheme for the period of remedy. At the point of their retirement, they will be offered the choice. First choice is, do you want the benefits from 2015 to 22 in your legacy scheme, or would you prefer them in the 2015 scheme? So one's a final salary scheme and the other one is a career average. In the meantime, their contribution record will also be updated, and any amounts due, because the employee contribution rates are higher in the legacy scheme, will be recovered over a period of a maximum 10 years, and that's specified within the regulations. Retired members within scope will also have their pension entitlement recalculated. Now, some of those will have retired with full legacy benefits, some will have retired and deferred their career average benefits, and some of them will have received a mixture of both. But they will now have a choice. Basically, it's either or. Would you like your legacy or would you like your career average? And again, any money due, if they opt for the legacy, will be deducted from their lump sum adjustment. I guess the question really is, what does this mean practically? Practically for us, it means that we have to undertake for each individual a year-by-year reconciliation where we analyse the payroll records for pension purposes. Clearly, that's a massive oversimplification, and I probably can't underestimate the time it takes. So you can appreciate going through individual records over a 7-year period, identifying which elements of pay were pensionable and which weren't, and that work is ongoing. Similarly, our pension administrator, which is Dyfed, have received software updates, but they're not yet finalised. So the software supplier is releasing them. So they've done the bulk of the work to make sure that the pensions can be calculated. And then what they're now doing is releasing all the more complex areas. To add into the mix, the taxation impact is also being worked through by HMRC, as some employees will have breached their annual allowance, and we also need to factor in tax relief on any contributions due. To support us in this, HMRC toolkit has been developed, and not only do we therefore have to work through each pension record, we have to then run it through a HMRC toolkit for tax purposes as well. In terms of reporting progress, we will be providing regular updates to the local pension board, and that will include the phasing of work according to priority groups. So you will appreciate those coming up to retirement are really keen that we get it right and we do it once. So they will be our priority group, as too will be anybody who's received an ill health retirement, because the rules are very different. And then after that, we will work through those members who've retired, either with 92 benefits or 2015. So a huge amount of work being undertaken by the team, but absolutely not unique to us. And this has been replicated across the country as well. In that respect, we're really well supported. We're a member of the local government club, as it were, and therefore that gives us assurance that we're doing the right thing at the right time. And similarly, we're working with unions just to ensure that the comms is out there for our members as well. Happy to take any queries on the report.
Thank you, Helen. I'm not quite sure why the agenda papers just gives a mention of one report, the Firefighters Pension Scheme update, but in the actual attached papers, there's 14A and 14B. So you're quite right. There's two reports you're presenting, but there's only one listed in the agenda paper. But there we go. Councillor Rob Triggs, is this on a declaration of interest?
Yeah,
matter?
I just wanted to check with Gareth if I should have declared on this one. I don't know whether we're making any decisions. I think it's just accepting it, is it?
And that's as an ex-firefighter with a membership of the pension fund. As you say, it's just for information, but personal interest would be appropriate, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Paul Cunningham has also mentioned in the chat the same thing. So yes, if you want to declare a personal interest, that's fine. I think it relates to Councillor Jeff Evans as well. Thank you. Any comments or questions for Helen, please?
Chair, just for the benefit of anybody that might be watching, a personal interest is for transparency. It doesn't prevent a councillor taking part or voting in the debate.
Thank you, Gareth, for that clarification. Any questions or comments? No, so it's just for noting the report. Can I have a proposer, please? I'm still looking around for a proposer. Diolch, Mark, and the seconder. Thank you, Jeff. Will members show that they accept the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr. So the second report, Helen?
Yeah, and I probably have to admit to this. Initially, I was going to bring a single report covering 2 legal matters, but when I started writing the papers, I thought, do you know what, this is confusing me, never mind any reader of the report, so apologies. The second item relates to the pension entitlement for retained personnel. And members will be aware retained personnel largely work on a part-time contract. This is a long and complicated legal matter relating to those retained staff. Initially and historically, they were excluded from joining the pension scheme. So if you go back many decades, they just weren't allowed to join the pension scheme. This was initially rectified in 2006, whereby retained personnel could join what was then known as the 2007 scheme. The regulations were then changed to allow them to join, so that was then backdated to the 1st of July 2000, and that came about due to the part-time workers regulations. Colloquially, this is known as the first choice exercise, because it was the first time that the RDS personnel were offered the choice of effectively buying back their service dating back to July 2000. They were at that time permitted to join what was known as the 2007 modified scheme. And it was called modified because it was a modified version of the 1992 scheme, which is the whole-time firefighters. That was introduced, but a further legal challenge, not brought necessarily by firefighters. It was actually brought by a barrister who'd been working part-time. And what the barrister said was, yeah, it's all very well, sort of giving me that right, but you need to go right back to the start of my contract. So therefore, there is legislation which is impactful on the retained personnel, and it has 2 impacts. Firstly, the eligible member date has been extended. It should have been at the original to the exercise to the 7th of April 2000. And if you are an eligible member, the eligible period for which an individual can purchase pension has been extended right back to the start of their contract. And I say that because that might mean on occasions 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 48 years, quite exceptional. But you will appreciate that our records going back that period are probably non-existent. And I don't know many people that have kept their pay slips for that period either. So the Welsh Government has recently consulted on the proposed regulations. They're already in force in England. They came into force on the 1st of October, which is further making matters very confusing. And the appendix contained within the paper confirms the authorities' response. In very broad terms, we're in agreement regarding the proposal. and it's anticipated that the regulations will come into force in the spring of 2024. And similarly to the previous item, we have 18 months to address this. So if the team isn't going to be busy enough looking at the age discrimination, they're going to be kept very, very busy with this. Internally within the organisation, we're going to hold a series of what we're classing as pension catch-ups, and that'll allow all staff the opportunity of jumping onto an online session to more fully understand the impact of this for them, because you will appreciate a lot of the retained staff have either retired and wonder what's going to happen, or indeed are coming up with retirement and they would like to know whether they can retire and do it retrospectively. So quite a lot of work ongoing in terms of communications, but it's definitely going to keep the team busy over the next 18 months. I'm happy to take any queries on that.
Thank you, Helen. As you say, it's a very complicated area, and just for members' information, I've had very positive feedback from FBU representatives in relation to the work that Helen and her team are doing in this area, so that's pleasing to note. Councillor Jeff Evans.
Yeah, I only want to give you a little bit of information. I was a union official working for the authority, and I was involved for just over 20 years and used as a test case in Brussels to allow part-time staff, I was working at the youth clubs at the time, to join the pension scheme. As a result of that, after just over 21 years, the case was won, and I, for one person, paid back fees, and I joined the pension scheme for the prior 21 years. Now, I don't know whether that type of thing would apply to retained staff in the fire service, but I know that all part-timers now have equal status in the right to join a pension scheme and to pay in retrospectively for the years of their service.
Interesting.
So that is just information.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Markian. Mark, you've disappeared from the screen, but you've got your hand up. I don't know if you're still there. No. Any other comments or questions from members? No, the recommendations are just for noting. Can I have a proposer, please? Thanks, Jeff. A seconder? Thank you, Mark. Diolch yn fawr. Will members show that they approve the report? Diolch yn fawr. So when we're coming towards the close, item 15, new training centre land purchase, and back to Deputy Chief Fire Officer Stuart. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Hydref. Thank you, Chair. So members, the purpose of this report is to provide you with an update on the work undertaken to assess the suitability of identified land in St Asaph, Denbighshire, for the future development of a sustainable training and development centre in North Wales. The report also confirms the recommendation for members to support the land purchase and necessary new mitigation work now that the due diligence has been completed on that land. The land purchase being the first step in developing a business case for members to consider building a new training and development centre in North Wales. And this is to mitigate the current and future health and safety concerns regarding the operational and wider organisational training provision in North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. If approved, the purchase of this land will not commit the Fire and Rescue Authority to the construction of a new training centre. And if the scheme does not progress, the land purchase will provide the authority with a valuable capital asset going forward. However, the Fire Authority is committed to the provision of essential operational training to its staff to support service delivery and ensure firefighter safety. This is in accordance with health and safety legislation, the Fire and Rescue Services Act of 2004, and the Fire and Rescue National Framework for Wales 2016. During the past decade, the authority will have noted the number of fires and other emergencies have reduced significantly. Although this is a success story for the prevention work that has taken place in our communities during this time, It has resulted in the risk of firefighters having less exposure to the wide range of hazards and complex situations they are likely to face when attending such incidents. The Chief Fire Officer's assessment undertaken in 2021 also identified training as a priority area, and Fire Authority approval was given to undertake a full review of operational training and development provision within the service. Therefore, the service has undertaken a review of its operational training facilities, and as a result, it's become apparent that they do not provide the facilities required to train staff operating in a modern-day fire and rescue service for its long-term future. Although the firehouse training facility in Gogledd Fire Station continues to be used for operational training, it requires significant investment to extend its medium-term lifespan for risk-critical breathing apparatus and firefighter tactics training. It cannot be considered as a long-term option for operational training, and is therefore a health and safety concern for the future training provision in North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. The breathing apparatus training facilities in Hydref, Wrexham and Deeside fire stations have also been reviewed and have been found to provide adequate cold smoke localised training opportunities for staff, though some minor improvements are required. It must be noted that these facilities are not designed to allow firefighters to train in an environment that exposes them to realistic and immersive conditions that replicate real-life emergencies through the use of fire, heat and smoke. A requirement for all breathing apparatus wearers to act in accordance with the Fire and Rescue Service's National Operational Guidance breathing apparatus training specification and also our service policy. The service also has compartment fire behaviour training facilities located within the Airbus factory site in Broughton. However, our site appraisal has identified that there are many shortcomings to this service, relying on the facilities for its primary usage. It has also been identified that none of the sites are suitable to meet the long-term welfare and the management of fire contaminants requirements for our staff when they attend breathing apparatus training courses involving the use of fire, heat and smoke. To mitigate these risks, operational training and development for our staff in a realistic and immersive training environment, which includes adequate health and safety measures, needs to be at the forefront of our thinking for training and development centre design. The review of operational training facilities in the service also supports the finding of the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor's thematic review of operational training within the Welsh Fire and Rescue Services undertaken in October 2022, which recognises the need for significant capital investment required to replicate real-world conditions for firefighters to develop, maintain and refresh their operational skills. A full review of our current training facilities and options appraisal for the future provision will be included in a new training centre business case to be presented at a future Fire Authority meeting following scrutiny by the new training centre working group. Members will recall that on the 17th of October 2022, the Fire Authority approved the allocation of budget for the development of a detailed business case for the new training development centre, and since then a number of options for a build programme are being explored by the programme team. The work has included the identification of a suitable parcel of land to locate the new training and development centre in St Asaph, Denbighshire, which the authority approved a 6-month exclusivity agreement with the vendor, which expired on the 27th of September this year. However, due to the site being assessed as suitable following the necessary due diligence, the vendor has agreed to extend this agreement until the conclusion of this Fire Authority meeting today. The exclusivity agreement has enabled the relevant surveys and suitability assessments to be undertaken on the site, and discussions have also been held with local planning officers prior to the submission of any potential outline and planning application. The outcome of this due diligence supports the recommendation for the authority to purchase the land. During this time, a working group consisting of 6 Fire Authority members, 1 from each of the authority areas, has also been established with the aim to develop and scrutinise plans and the business case as discussed. This working group has also visited neighbouring Fire and Rescue Service training development centres to identify areas of good practice. Members will also recall that a budget for land purchase has also previously been approved by the authority, with its use conditional on members' approval. Therefore, the land cost of £2.75 million is included in the authority's budget for 23-24, and if approved, will be funded through external borrowing should Welsh Government assistance not be available. The full annual cost at the current prevailing interest rates would be £150,000. If the land purchase is approved, the business case, including an options appraisal timetable, costs will be developed for members to review prior to any decision to proceed with the new training centre build programme. We also know that new mitigation work is required on this site, which can only take place during a single period of the year. Therefore, this work would need to Therefore, this work will need to proceed from December 2023 and up to October 2024 to have the site ready for any potential future development to take place from December 2024. Therefore, it's recommended that members note the background to the review of the fire and rescue training facilities in the North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Note that the current training facility provision is reaching the end of its life. Approve the purchase of land in St Asaph, Denbighshire that has been assessed as being suitable for the construction of a new training and development centre in North Wales. And approve commencement of the new mitigation work to ensure that the site could be ready for construction from December 2024 onwards, following members' approval of a viable scheme. That concludes the report, Chair. So, diolch yn fawr. Happy to take any questions.
There's a number of hands being raised. I'll take them in order as they appear on the screen. Councillor Paul Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all reiterate that the purchase of the land for the new proposed training centre is a separate entity from the emergency fire cover review. It's nothing to do with that. And the purchase of the land is vital to the training centre being built for future, to give our firefighters the best training facilities for them, knowing how conditions have changed and are changing. So I would move the recommendations, Chair. Our firefighters deserve the best, and it's up to us to give them the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Cynghorydd Gwynfor Owen.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Dwi'n hapus i eilio'r cynnig, ond ar sail be mae'r swyddog wedi dweud heddiw. Ond mae gynnau gwestiynau yn codi am y ganolfan yn dilyn un o'r llythyrau da ni wedi cael gan yr undeb y gweithwyr yn datgan pryder bod yr awdurdod yn gwario ar y ganolfan yma. Mae hynny yn golygu un o ddau beth i mi. Un ydy da ni heb cael trafodaethau digonol gyda'r undeb yn esbonio pa mor dda, pa mor fuddiol bydd y ganolfan newydd. Neu os ydym ni wedi cael y trafodaethau yno, dwi'n ffeindio'n anodd dall pam bod yr undeb dim yn cefnogi'r peth yn llwyr, achos ar diwedd y dydd rhywbeth i helpu y gweithwyr ydy hwn i fod. Ac os ydy'r undeb yn wedi cael ei perswadio o'i werth o, mae'n codi amryw o gwestiynau yn y meddwl i. Ond fel dwi'n dweud, dwi'n hapus eilio ar argymelliad ar sawl beth y swyddog yn dweud heddiw.
Stuart, do you want to come back in on that, please?
Sorry, Chair, I just missed the end with the translation crossover.
Yeah, I think it's a question about why is it the FBU aren't supporting this proposal when you'd expect them to support the proposal to build a new training centre? Yeah,
well, I think, in the current environment of the emergency cover review, I think the point that Councillor Cunningham made around making sure that we don't compare one against the other. I think there may have been some comparisons made with that. There's clearly some concerns around the future budgets, and that's linking to the emergency cover review. But I agree with Councillor Cunningham that they are two separate risks. We've got risks on one hand of the emergency cover review about providing an equitable service which is resilient for the future of emergency cover. And on the other hand, we've got an additional risk now with our training facilities coming to end of life. As well as that, the training facilities don't afford some of the more recent and emerging risks of contamination and decontamination staff and the way that we manage that going forward as well. So we have spoken to the Fire Brigades Union about this. They have raised some concerns. It's more linking it to the emergency cover review is what we found. I'm sure that dialogue will continue going forward.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Gareth Sandlands.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a question of investment. We're investing in people. We're a people organisation, and it's vital that we carry on going forward. But we're also investing where this is located is a very, very popular spot for people expanding businesses, employment use. It is a very competitive, the land is most sought after, and if we don't buy it, somebody else will in the next couple of months. But just to put a positive that this is not for a decision today, like the previous speakers have said. This is a decision on the land only. You know, we've got a whole lot of detail to look at in the meantime, and every single member here, I'm sure, would want to get involved in exactly what we've got there. So the level of detail is yet to be discussed and finalised and made a decision on. So it is the land banking that we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you,
I would have proposed it, but unfortunately, two other people have already done so. So thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. And you're absolutely spot on. That all we're doing today is confirming the purchase of the land, nothing further. And if we don't do that, then that opportunity is gone. Councillor Mark Young.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with any of the previous speakers, but I'm gonna ask a couple of difficult questions, if I may, if that's okay, Chair, because we have to get this right, and we know money's right. So, so one for Gareth and then one for Stuart, I guess. So clearly we haven't approved the business case yet. So are we safe to make this decision today? I know in a perfect world, the approval would have been in place. So I guess I'm asking Stuart, ideally, both would have been sorted at the same time. So just some thoughts on that. And it's just so we understand why we haven't approved, but we're asking for the land. And Gareth, just to confirm the legal side of that, if we can, please, because we are making this decision retrospectively here. So I just want comfort from Gareth and Stuart to respond to the timings of it. Thank you.
So I can pick up the kind of the timings one first, and you're absolutely right. Thanks for the question, Councillor Young. That at the very start of this, when approval was given for us to review training, it included what the future training provision was going to look like, and it was also going to include identifying a piece of land, and both of those pieces of work ran together. As Helen described earlier on, the financial landscape has changed significantly since we started this piece of work, and that's not only with interest rates, but also with the price of materials, construction. So the initial costs around building a new training centre, we've had to kind of look at, are they affordable for the future? And actually what that's asked us to do is actually look at what our aspirations were for that very aspirational design that we initially had, which was costed, and that's what's being included within the medium-term financial plan, against actually affordability, and is this the right thing to do? So that's why the business case isn't finalised, because what I've asked officers to do, and also the project team, is to go back actually and give us a range of options that would satisfy what our future training provision needs to be, but also what our minimum are and are aspirational at the same time. Clearly, the land purchase work has carried on because we identified a suitable piece of land in a location that we believe is as accessible as possible for all of our members of staff across the whole of North Wales. Because as you will remember, one of the challenges we have with Dolgellau, as well as it being ageing, is that its location for staff having to travel significant distances. As being pointed out by Councillor Sanderlands as well, is that this piece of land actually is a prime location, and when we actually got the value of the land and then had that tested against the valuers, actually it's at a price that we think is beneficial as well. So that's why we're now at this point where the land work has continued, and we're at the point now of, do we want to purchase the land, but the business case still has to be reviewed based on current and ongoing financial picture, and also what we want from a training centre in the future. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's worth noting, I hope you don't mind the question. I think making that clear, and you described it very well, so I support it, but thanks for that. And it's just a question on, are we okay? Because we haven't got the business case. Any thoughts off Gareth on that?
Yes, Chair, we're fine. I think it was Councillor Sanderlands that pointed out the risk that pertains if we delay in terms of the purchase. It's prudent for the authority to secure that site whilst it resolves the finer details of what it's looking for in terms of the business case for what will actually be constructed upon it.
Diolch, Gareth. Councillor Jeff Evans.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, like everybody else on this panel, believe that we need the best training facilities, the best opportunities for our fire service men and women to be trained to a standard which meets a need and beyond. However, as regards this land purchase, I wonder why the Fire Service Brigade Union are not supporting it. And that leaves me in an awkward position, because then I'm not comfortable in going ahead with even the land purchase until I see and know and hear what the Fire Brigades Union's reservations are. It may well be that they don't want to go to that location. I don't know. I don't know what their arguments are, but I'm not comfortable with a purchase of the land when we haven't got, at this moment in time, the staff in with us. Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments. It's interesting. I was in Llangefni Fire Station one night last week talking to the crew there, and they were very supportive of a new training centre, and very much in agreement that the current one in Dolgellau is no longer fit for purpose. But as has already been said, I think the concerns of the FBU is that it's the financial aspect linked to the emergency cover review, but as has already been explained, they are two separate projects. I think ACFO Helen MacArthur wants to come in.
Thank you very much. I think it's probably worth noting that the FBU concern, I think, related primarily to the proposal to build the very ambitious training centre. My informal dialogue, and I appreciate it is informal, in relation to the land purchase, has met a very different response, and definitely the local officials last week certainly highlighted that they understood and were sort of more accommodating of the decision around the land, and recognised that the land itself provided options for the future, and that the decision about what those future options were was a separate and distinct from the land purchase. So I don't know if that fully assures Councillor Evans, but certainly my understanding is it was the totality of the scheme, but primarily in relation to that ambitious project.
Thank you, Helen. That's very helpful. Councillor Gareth Roberts.
Hello, yeah, diolch yn fawr. I'd just like to ask really the question, I think I've asked this previously, what action has been taken to develop this idea? I'm not against the idea, but to develop it in conjunction with the police and ambulance service to mitigate the costs, because I think that's crucial really in this day and age. Thank you.
So I don't know whether the chief, through meetings at JESC nationally, has got any feedback, but the initial kind of feedback that we've had locally is that, you know, they would be supportive of training alongside us, and actually the kind of opportunities to come in with us and build a training centre are limited. So though the ambition would be for this training centre to be a multi-agency training hub, that would be more around making sure that those other agencies come along and train alongside us to make us more effective on our response. That's not to say that we won't continue to discuss any opportunities for collaboration with them, and obviously take those opportunities as we see them being fit for the future.
Thank you, Stuart. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we're empire building with our new training centre, Chair. 40 years ago, I was a member of the training department in the old Clwyd Fire Service. And the facilities we had at Rhyl suited us at the time. The smokehouse that's still in Rhyl was our primarily site for BA training, breathing apparatus training, of which I was a breathing apparatus instructor. To complement that, we used the Mines Rescue Service in Wrexham to do humidity training, which was very beneficial to us. And it's important that we have the best facilities. I, together with other members of this committee, went to Greater Manchester and we went to Cheshire to see what they've got on offer. harping back to my time, I wish we had some of those facilities then that they have now. But we've got to build we've got to cut our cloth according to our means. And if it means having the land and then in a couple of years' time building proper smoke house for firefighting, I would support, and then go on and on to supplement our training departments there onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I am conscious of the fact that we've got one more item on the agenda. I can see two more hands being raised, and then I'd like to move to the recommendations afterwards, if we can. Councillor Mark Young.
Yeah, just very quickly. So I was happy with my responses, and I'll be supporting this. But there was, and to prove I've read previous papers, there was talk of grant funding for this facility. If anyone can just quickly touch on that, because we're talking about finances being tight, but I'm sure we've had some positive responses. Thank you, Chair Giacomo.
Perhaps I
I
could
think the
come in.
Chief's going to come in. Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, I have regular meetings with Welsh Government officials, and at every meeting I bring this up and remind them that they are very supportive of the concept. It's just whether there is capital funding available. And at my last meeting, although they couldn't guarantee that there was any capital funding, they did say that we could go ahead and buy, and then they would look, if there was funding, to provide it in at a later date.
Okay, Giacomo, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Austin Roberts. Diolch, Austin.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Ie, dwi ar yr is-bwyllgor sy'n edrych I fewn i'r adnodd yma, ac o'n I methu mynd I ymweld ar safleoedd yn Swydd Gaer ac yn Manceinion, ond mi fi sy'n Dolgella, ac oedd o'n sioc I mi. Oedd o'n edrych yn gyntefig ac yn hen ffasiwn dros ben. Felly dwi'n meddwl bod o'n bwysig bod ni, ac ynglyn ar, dim ond sôn am prynu tir ydyn ni, a dwi'n siarad fel ffarmwr rwan, ond di hwn ddim yn dir amaethyddol, ond mae o'n dir. Ac beth sy'n digwydd yn aml iawn ydy, o flwyddyn I flwyddyn, mae'r costa yn codi. Felly dwi'n meddwl bod o'n bwysig bod ni'n cymryd y cyfla sydd gynnon ni I ceisio prynu y tir yma. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Austin. So there are 4 recommendations. They've already been supported. Can I invite members to show if they agree with approving the recommendations, please? Will you show? Thank you. That is unanimous. So, Jeff, you're raising your hand and you're shaking your head, so I'm not sure which way you're voting. You're on mute. No, you're still on mute, Jeff.
I'm not going to vote for it. I prefer this minute to abstain. The reason for that being, I believe totally 200% in the concept, but I still believe there's some answers and some information that we should still be getting from fire brigades unions, the budget, lots of other little things. So I'm totally for it, and if the committee votes for it, I will support them. But I feel for my own personal beliefs that I feel I have to abstain, and I don't ever like abstaining, but I don't want to vote against it either.
That's fine.
But I will abstain, sorry.
That's fine. We'll note your abstention. And Brian, you've got your hand up. Is that because you're voting in support of the recommendations?
No, no, Chair. I'm of the same mind as Austin Roberts. I don't like abstaining, but I have some doubts, so I will abstain at this point.
That's fine. We shall note those abstentions. Thank you very much, everybody. So we come to last, but certainly not least, the item on the agenda, and that's the Audit Wales presentation in relation to the reducing automatic fire alarms. Thank you for the Audit Wales members who've been waiting very patiently for this item, and I presume it's Avros. Avros, are you going to present this item? Diolch.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, bore da. I believe there's a short cover paper which colleagues may talk through first. We do have a very short presentation on the back of that, if that would be helpful. Or no, yeah, we can go straight into our presentation if you don't want to talk through the cover paper. While I share my screen, I'm conscious my colleague Arwin is on the call. I'll let him introduce himself and the item very briefly before I share my screen. Thank you.
So, Joe, with the help, if I come in just to give a very quick overview of the cover paper, and then obviously I think get some time to get the report.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, so diolch Gareth, product pawb. So this report was published in March of this year after the audit was undertaken in relation to false alarm reduction between November 2022 and March 2023. And the other two fire records were also visited at the same time. It was presented and considered by the executive panel at the meeting back in June. Audit Wales had considered whether the authority, and I hope not to sort of say too much that you're going to say again in a moment here, but Audit Wales had considered the authority, if the authority is doing all that it can to reduce prevalence and responses to non-domestic fire false alarms. And they found the authority had significantly reduced the number of non-domestic fire false alarms at 10. It does need to address financial risks and capacity issues to ensure its risk-based approach is sustainable. And there were 3 recommendations that were made. There's a trace of those recommendations on paragraph 6, 7, and 8 of the covering report. I won't go into them now because I'm sure Spiros will probably do that in a moment. There was an opportunity for officers to feedback on an initial draft of the report, and much of that feedback related to making a clearer differentiation between domestic and non-domestic false alarms. As it says in the report, domestic false alarms are considered to be an opportunity to get over the threshold of those who are most at risk in our communities, so that we can do all that we can to try to make them as safe as they can be. All the Wales have subsequently provided feedback about whether those observations were noted, accepted, or partially accepted. So that's a very quick overview from me before I invite you to take it up from there.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Avos?
Diolch, thank you. I'll just share my screen briefly, and Karen, do you want to come in very quickly?
Yeah, bro, diolch yn fawr i nos. Yeah, just one cyfle I gyflwyno'n hun, so just wanted an opportunity to introduce myself. So our colleague Nick Selwyn, who's the manager for the audit, for the performance audit work at the Fire Authority, retired over summer. So I'll be taking over that role from Nick Selwyn. So I wanted to come today to introduce myself. Unfortunately, AROS will also be rotating off the Fire Authorities. We've got a new audit lead in Nigel Griffiths, who's unable to attend today. So this was the last report from AROS and the team, and we'll be taking over from here, really. So I wanted to come and introduce myself to the committee. But in discussing then this work with Nick before he left, I think the overall conclusion and some of the graphs in the report really show the reduction in impact some of these decisions can have on the Fire Authority and the benefits that's had in terms of capacity. But unfortunately, as across much of the public sector at the minute, there continues to be challenges in those areas, and hopefully our recommendations go a step further in helping you overcome those. So yeah, I'll pass back to AROS to go through the detail of the report then.
Right, diolch, Garwin. So very quickly then, I won't spend too much time on this to avoid repeating what's already been presented by ACFO Millington and what's noted in the covering paper. But just to highlight very briefly, this was a thematic review that we carried out across all 3 fire rescue authorities as part of our performance audit programme in 2022-23. And as been noted, we've shared the final report for North Wales with officers back in June 23. And given that this was a thematic review as well, we are also producing a national summary report to highlight some of the key themes and common challenges coming out across Wales, and that will be published in the next few weeks. But our review focused primarily on non-domestic false fire alarms, and in this respect, the scope of our review mostly cover the authority's automatic fire alarms policy, the AFA policy, and how any reduction in that regard is helping to reduce the prevalence and attendances at false alarms overall. So we looked at things like the authority's policy, how that was developed and has been implemented. We looked at ongoing arrangements to monitor false alarms, and we looked at how performance has been managed and evaluated as well. So very briefly, just a bit of background in terms of why we focused on false alarms this year. So from a policy perspective, the Welsh Government sets out in its national framework that it expects fire and rescue authorities to identify the main sources of false alarms and take all reasonable and practical steps to reduce their incidence. And also there's clearly a big demand on the service, which is drawing on our resources and capacity. So it's important that we, I guess, ask your external auditor help to explain why that is and what's being done about it as well. And in this respect, the report does set out your challenging operating environment, including a real-term decrease of 6.3% revenue expenditure between 2009-10 and 21-22. And in terms of what that looks like, the report does include data showing the number of staff employed by the authority, which fell by over 15% between 2009-10 and 21-22. So I guess when you consider false alarms in the context of the overall demands on the service, it's clear that authorities do need an effective approach to manage the impact they're having on your use of resources. And clearly, this is especially important in the context of some of the agenda items that's been considered by members this morning, but also going forward, considering Welsh Government's ambitions to broaden the role of firefighters and creating that capacity needed to support and realise that ambition as well. In terms of our findings and our conclusions, we found that the authority has a well-embedded policy to address false alarms in non-domestic premises, and that this policy has helped to significantly reduce the number of non-domestic false alarms that you attend. It was introduced initially as a policy in 2014-15, and it clearly stipulates that the service will not send an emergency response to non-domestic AFA actuations unless a 999 backup call is made, and there are clear exceptions then which do elicit a response. And members may be aware that the policy was reviewed last year to reflect some of the evolving community risks following the pandemic. Carwyn, you mentioned some of the graphics in the report, and when the policy was initially introduced, you can see quite clearly from the data that it led to quite a dramatic drop in attendance. So North Wales is that light grey line in the bottom there, and towards the middle of the graphic you can see quite clearly the attendances as a proportion of those AFAs received since 2008-9, and you can see there was a drop of almost about 35-40% in the year following the introduction of the policy. So our report does highlight the need to address financial risk and capacity issues to ensure that your risk-based approach is sustainable in terms of managing false alarms. By this, we mean considering false alarms, excuse me, in the context of the overall impact on your resources and ensuring that it feeds into the wider discussions around things like the emergency fire cover review as well. To give you an idea of the numbers quickly, in 21-22 there were around 300 AFA calls attended in non-domestic properties, and so the report does highlight the need to keep on top of this, I guess, and continue to manage the number that you attend. And many of these attendances will be for health board facilities, so working with colleagues in the health board to reduce attendances is a theme that came out quite strongly across all three fire and rescue authorities. However, we would say that despite the partnership working focus and the positive relationships, that the health board does continue to generate quite a significant amount of false alarms. Our report makes 3 recommendations to reflect some of the ongoing challenges of managing false alarms. The first is very much aimed at improving how the authority quantifies the impact. The second is around improving integration. And by that, we mean the way that you capture data and intelligence from non-attendances and the way you use that then to help inform the work of business fire safety teams. And finally, the third recommendation is very much around keeping on top of it, as I mentioned, ensuring that performance data relating to false alarms attendances is presented to members regularly for scrutiny. And I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions, but just to note, officers back in June helpfully accepted our recommendations, and they'll be best placed, I guess, to elaborate on the actions that the service is taking in response to the report. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Eros. If we can sort of go back to main screen, that's great. Couple of comments from me before I open it up to questions and comments from members. First of all, as you say, Eros, the recommendations have been accepted and they are actually contained in the annual governance statement action plan going forward. So those have now been adopted. And then I'm just going to quote I find it a very interesting report and certainly sort of plenty of sort of food for thought there. And paragraph 54 of the report says, however, despite being presented with performance information on false alarms, our review of the minutes of full authority and audit committee meetings over the last 2 years found little evidence of members actively seeking to challenge performance on false alarms or help support financial and operational improvement. So that's a challenge for us as members, that we need to be more fulfilling our role as critical friends, I think, in terms of looking at performance in this area going forward. Any questions or comments for Eros or for Stuart? No. Okay, in that case, can I have somebody to propose that we accept the recommendations of the report, please? Thank you, Mark. Diolch, Austin. Lots of hands going up. Got everybody show. There we go. That has been approved. It's been a long meeting, but I think a very productive one. And can I just thank everybody for their participation today and for their attendance. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. Thank you, everybody.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Diolch.
Diolch, Paul.
Diolch.